the whole Indian ecosystem was shifting and changing rapidly. We were already well on the way to becoming the youngest demography in the country. Middle class India was getting younger. The digital revolution was well on us, and obviously in recent years, especially post the pandemic, accelerated even more. So it is increasingly becoming a digital first economy, and every business, and travel has always been at the forefront of the digital e-com revolution, as you'll appreciate, and sort of being a late entrant, thanks to the constraints I spoke of earlier. We actually were making up for lost time, right? Because we actually got into the game of e-com in any form only in 2015 seriously, right? So we were really catching up on a lot of people, including Make My Trip and etc., who had already made a big play, huge investments, a lot of promoters, etc. And we were catching up, right? What we had going for us was a strong traditional brand, and we leveraged that obviously as we went into the e-com space. And I think the whole change in the ecosystem, the push towards digital and e-commerce, and the fact that that big change was creating a customer who now was no longer happy with the response of 24, 48 hours. It was about 24 minutes rather than 24 hours, right? And what that means is you pretty much have to have a completely different organization, right? You have to have not only the ability to buy to scale, starting you had to have the plan to scale, then you have to have the will to scale, the resource to scale, the ability to scale, the purchasing power to scale in that sense, and the ability to deliver to scale, right? All within the 24 minutes or less that was increasingly becoming the norm. And to that extent, this was already setting in motion because of what the customer had become. So in a way, very honestly, it was not about us anticipating a future that was going to happen. It was about a present that was already pushing us. It's always more difficult in a big moving ship that's already halfway in the sea, rather than preparing in the harbor or dock and then setting sail, right? And to that extent, we were already mid-sea, right? We've been at sea in that sense for 145 years. So we were pretty much re-engineering a 145-year-old ship while it was in the middle of a voyage. So the older generation that was loyalist to us were becoming less important. Economic power shifting to the next generation, and so on and so forth. So we quickly had to make the shift to be relevant to the next generation. Today, as we sit here discussing it, we are the clear leader in outbound travel between Thomas Cook and SOTC, clear leader in inbound between TCI and SITA. We are among the top 3 foreign exchange players, including banks, which we were earlier nowhere close to that. We are the leader in MICE, the leader in corporate travel. So in almost every space of travel and travel related services, we have become a leader. And we've also gone global. In a way, it's a bit like a Hindi movie script. We are a Indian subsidiary of a British company that today owns the British company brand name and is in its own right a global player in 25 countries and 5 continents. Today, we are able to see that we are now attracting an average age of customers which is 10 years younger than, let's say, in 2015, which is proof that this journey is worth it, because if that average age had not shifted by this 10 years, it would have been proof that we have not actually managed to make that shift, that generational shift. That's proof of sustainability, right? I think if I were to step back to those times when we did what we did, I think in terms of getting that mind shift, both for the collective leadership and then to cascade it down itself, where I partnered with Equitor, and I thought that worked well for both sides, was creating a structure to thinking differently. Almost the idea of structured innovation, which in itself is a bit ironical, because you think of innovation as this unstructured, free-flowing, unfettered, mad scientist kind of process. So the idea of saying, listen, can you actually structure a conversation so people start getting innovative or start thinking differently? It seems a bit sort of like an antonym, but in a way that's exactly what we did with the whole, blue ocean Pygmalion kind of thing. Was about really saying, listen, there's so much more headroom with a brand like Thomas Cook, which is building on what the promoter already believed, and Therefore, what more can we do quickly? What more can we do easily? What more should we be doing legitimately that we are not doing yet? And getting leadership first and then one level below that to start absorbing that this is a very different culture now. We want you to think differently, not like historically where we were saying, stay like this, do like this and all that. It was about, we actually now want you to think differently, think opportunity, think growth, encourage that way of thinking, the freedom to express ideas, and the willingness to experiment and possibly fail, which in the Thomas Cook that we came into, the culture was always about risk averse, right? It was not about doing something new and failing, because then failure was what you were associated with. So like saying, okay, trying and failing, you will actually be seen as a sort of innovator, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I think, that whole structure and that working together, because what Equita brought to the table was not only the structure and the process, but also the objectivity and the credibility to drive an exercise like this with the set of leaders who were very, very competent, experienced people who needed to have that kind of confidence in the person who was telling them, now think differently. Zag instead of zigging, right? Now, if I've got 30 years of experience and I'm fairly successful, I'm not going to just take any Tom, Dick or Harry's thing that I should zig when I've been zagging and doing well all the while. So I think, what Equita brought to the table was the goodwill, competence, capability, structure, process, and the partnership. And I use partnership in an all-encompassing term because it really is about working together, right, to an end goal. And changing a way of thinking. Now that is a bigger end state than any business end state. Because to get a set of people to think differently and leave behind a cultural shift that is more enduring than the engagement itself, I think is truly a very difficult thing to achieve. Rather than say, okay, I'm working on this project and the end result is 3x of turnover or 5x of profit. That's a fixed process, very clear, deliverables. But changing people's minds and keeping them changed, even if there are short-term challenges and the results aren't there, I think is a far more difficult task that actually requires a lot more soft skills than just project management.